Welcome to the video on paper F8, that's Audit and Assurance. My name is Preeti Joseph. I'm working for Phoenix Financial Training, and these are the final words from the tutor. Just to give you an idea about the structure of the paper, the F8 paper is actually broken down into two sections. You have section A as well as you have section B of the paper. Section A is actually multiple choice questions, or you can say as multiple task questions, where you have totally 3 scenarios. Each of the scenarios has got 5 questions, and each question is going to be worth 2 marks. So the total marks for your section A of the paper is actually going to be worth 30 marks. Whereas section B of the paper actually is the main chunk for paper F8, which comprises of 70% or 70 marks of your paper. There are totally 3 questions under that, where one of the question is going to be worth 30 marks and the remaining 2 questions is going to be worth 20 marks each. Please keep in mind in terms of the structure of the paper. Section A of the paper will start off with question number 1. It will go all the way to question number 15. So as I said, each scenario is going to be 5 questions. Then when you move to the scenario number 2, it won't start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if scenario 1 will start with question 1 to question 5, then scenario 2 will start from question 6 to question 10. Then scenario 3 will continue on from like question 11 to question 15. But when you move on to section B of the paper, the question numbers will technically continue on. So it will go on from like the 3 questions will be under question 16, question 17 and question 18. So don't get lost saying that there's maybe a typo error in the question paper, but that's how the paper is going to be laid out for you. Now in terms of the syllabus structure, for section A of your paper, technically the whole syllabus across through the F8 can be tested for you in the section A of the paper. So you should be ready completely in terms of your multiple choice questions. The only thing you should just realize is for those people who is doing paper based and for those people who are doing CBEs, that's the computer based exams, the question may slightly differ in terms of the style of the question. If you are doing the paper based exam for paper F8, the section A of your paper in terms of your multiple task questions or the multiple choice questions will only be where they'll give you a question and they will say A, B, C, D and choose either one of them. Yeah, the second style of question will be choose A, B, C, D, E, F and choose any 2 or 3 of them given to you. That's the maximum that they can actually test you from a paper based point of view. So even when you're looking at the question where you have 2 or 3 options where you need to choose, in that all of them have to be right. If even one of them goes wrong, then the whole question is going to be marked wrong for you. So it's either all right to get the 2 marks or it's 0. Whereas when it comes to the computer based exam, the style of questions that can come for you is obviously one where options are given to you, you need to choose any one, or else there are options given to you where you need to choose any 2 or 3 of them. It can be match the following, where you need to take one box to another box and match them together, or else it can be like true and false, where you need to highlight which is true, which is false. There are different kinds of questions that can come for you from a computer based exam, which will not be applicable for a paper based exam. So you just need to be familiar and comfortable with those areas. But when we come to section B of your paper, as I told you, this is the main part for your paper F8. You need to focus on this, where you have 3 questions, the 30 mark question, the 20 mark questions that we're talking about. The structure in terms of what can come under each one of them can vary, and it has been changing from every another sitting. So the examiner has not been specific from like the 30 mark question will come from a specific area of the syllabus. No. Yeah, the examiner can actually change the structure in terms of the syllabus areas. What I will talk about is the overall syllabus areas that can be tested for you in section B of the paper. So the potential questions that can come for you is one is on audit risk questions. Whenever you're answering audit risk questions, you all should be familiar with the accounting standard and how does that accounting standard relate to the scenario given to you and the accounting treatment for that, and how will that lead to any kind of an overstatement or an understatement of your balance sheet item and your income statement items. Along with the audit risk question, that's where you explain the audit risk question. But along with that, they will even ask you what is the auditor's response to that in terms of how are you going to deal with the situation if you know that this particular risk has occurred, or how are you going to actually discover this particular risk. So what kind of an evidence are you actually going to gather for that? So that is one of the potential questions that can come for you in your section B of your paper. The second kind of question that can come for you is to do with controls, all to do with controls. So we're looking at from the sales cycle, the purchase cycle, the inventory, payroll, as well as the cash cycle. So they can ask you from any of these cycles, and from that you need to be comfortable with identifying what are the strengths that are there in the scenario. Strengths, what we are looking for is where there are already controls that have been put in place, and you need to tell me what are the advantages or the benefits of putting in those controls. So in other words, a control is put in place to mainly mitigate a particular risk. So you need to focus on that. So identify what are the controls and talk about the benefits of having those controls. What kind of risk is actually being mitigated? That's one kind of question that can come for you from a control syllabus point of view. The second kind of question is where they can ask you to identify what are the deficiencies that are there in a particular system. So it can either be the, as I told you, the purchase system or the sales system that we're talking about. For each of the deficiencies, you need to recommend or suggest what are the controls that needs to be put in place. Okay, when you think about controls, it has to be relevant to the deficiencies that is given to you. Then the fourth kind of question that can come for you is where they will ask you to perform test of controls for the controls that you have already recommended. So when you're performing test of controls, that is when you need to test for either for existence or you're testing for operating effectiveness. Whether does the control actually exist or does the control actually is operating effectively. So when you're using that, there are certain common terminologies that we can use from your audit procedures. Like you can observe a particular process to see whether does the control actually exist. You can physically verify a particular control, like maybe see if the supervisor is actually performing something, where you can check to see whether it's operating effectively. You can inspect documents. You can like purchase orders, you can inspect sales orders, goods delivery note, goods received notes. You can always inspect. So these three terminologies are the most common ones that we tend to use when you're designing test of control. One is observation, the other one is physical verification, and the last one is inspection. Kind request, please make sure you don't use the word check. You can either use the word review of a particular document, or else you can use the word inspect of a particular document. So please try to avoid using the word check because the examiner specifically says not to use that. So just repeating the questions that can come for you from a control point of view is where they'll ask you to talk about the strengths for the controls that is already put in place. Second, they can ask you for the deficiencies that are there in this particular cycle. That means the controls are not there. Third, for the deficiencies that you have identified, recommend the controls that needs to be put in place. And for the controls that you have put in place, you need to perform the test of controls. So that's another possibility of either a 30 mark question or the 20 mark question that we're talking about. The next questions that you need to be comfortable with is your substantive procedures. So there are three main topics that can be tested for you in section B of your paper. One is audit risk along with auditor's response. Two is all to do with controls and the questions revolving around that, the 4 questions. And the third one is all to do with substantive procedures. You should be able to design substantive procedures in any account balance. It can either be from the balance sheet or it can be from the P&L items or the income statement items. They will give you a scenario. Based on the scenario, you will need to design your audit procedures. So you need to be comfortable with talking about the procedure as well as linking the procedure to the assertions. So keep in mind, by just stating a procedure is not enough for you to get a 1 mark in your exam. Like for example saying inspect, let's say, goods delivery note. That is being very, very vague over there. You have to be very clear in your exam as to why are you inspecting the goods delivery note? What are you expecting to see in that? So the procedure should be where you say that you're inspecting goods delivery note, for evidence of, let's say, acknowledgement of the customer, or you can say for evidence of the signature of the customer. So you're looking at the document, you're telling specifically the reasons as to why are you looking in that document and to satisfy which assertion. So then you'll need to say is to ensure for existence and valuation of, let's say for example, receivables. So that will technically give you a full mark in your exam. If anything goes wrong in that or anything goes missing in that sentence, then you will lose marks accordingly, or you may not get any marks at all. So an ideal procedure or a substantive procedure would be is inspect goods delivery note for evidence of the signature or the acknowledgement of the customer, to ensure for existence and valuation of receivables. So this is how you need to design your substantive procedures in your exam, given the scenario to you. Okay. In your exam, they may either refer this as substantive procedures, or they can even call this as audit procedures. It's exactly the same thing. Don't get stressed as to what is the examiner trying to ask you. They both exactly mean the same. So I hope I've covered up every single thing, the topics that you need to be comfortable with. All the very best for your exam. Keeping in mind, make sure that you attempt section B of the paper first before you do section A of the paper, because section B takes time, especially considering it's a written based paper. It will take time for you to think and then apply that knowledge into the scenario and then develop an answer. So kind request, do section B. So when they say your time starts now, you start off, you don't even look at section A of the paper, go straight into section B of the paper. Look at the 3 questions first, rank them based on according to your level of knowledge, which one would you do first. So if you think you're comfortable with audit risk, do audit risk first. If you think you're comfortable with controls, do controls first. So you do the questions based on which you know best. So do them in that ranking and then start doing that specific question which you're comfortable with. And then go to the third or the second question which you feel like I'm not very, very comfortable with that area of the syllabus. Once you're finished with section B of the paper, that's when then I want you to move to section A of the paper. The maximum time that you need to spend in section B of the paper is going to be 2 hours of your exam. So the total hours for you in your exam is 3 hours and 15 minutes. So there's no specific time given to you for reading time. That's a total written time that we're talking about. For the computer-based exam, it's slightly different. So for the paper-based exam, whoever's elected for paper-based, your total hours is going to be 3 hours and 15 minutes in writing. Whereas for the paper-based exam, guys, you got 3 hours and 10 minutes of writing. So you got that 5 minutes short when you're talking about a computer-based exam. So as I'm recommending again, you start off with section B of the paper, take 2 hours in total to finish off section B, or let's say maximum 2 hours and 15 minutes to do the section B of your paper, and then move on to section A of the paper where you can spend around 45 minutes. If you're able to finish it within the given time, then you can spend the remaining time to do section A of the paper. So all the very best for your exam. I hope this video has been useful for you to focus on the main syllabus area just few days before the exam. Don't take stress, sleep well before you go into your exam hall the night before your exam. Please do read the technical articles one day before the exam. Reading the technical articles is very, very important for you, because you get an idea as to what can come in your exam through those technical articles. As audit reports is a new syllabus area, so please do make sure you do read that technical article. Okay, so once again, all the very, very best, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Take care and God bless.